An after-action report on the Brooklyn Day mass shooting.
This mass shooting is one of the most painful chapters in our city's history.
We take a deep dive into the failures by 3 city agencies and hold elected leaders accountable to ensure a tragedy like this never happens again. First on Fox, a vote of no confidence inside the Baltimore County Fire Department. A look at claims of a toxic work environment and the changes the fire union wants to make.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 4.
Rescue efforts are unfolding right now all across Florida. Take a look at this. The roof of this gas station getting ripped off this morning as Idalia made landfall.
This Category 3 hurricane is packing winds of 125 miles an hour. Right now, residents have been told to hunker down as Idalia moves inland and up the coast. Our meteorologist Jonathan Myers will track Idalia's path coming up in a moment. Thank you for joining us. I'm Kai Jackson.
And I'm Mary Bubala. We are tracking breaking news tonight as city leaders release the after-action report on the Brooklyn Day mass shooting.
This mass shooting is one of the most painful chapters in our city's history, which has had more than its fair share of painful chapters. We lost 2 young lives.
Well, the report focuses on the shortcomings of the Baltimore Police Department and Monsey and Safe Streets and the Housing Authority, each agency failing to identify the danger to the community and break up the massive block party before 2 people were sadly killed and 28 others were shot. We have team coverage on the report and its findings.
Let's start with Alexa Ashwell looking into how BPD failed to act. Alexa.
Kai, Mary, this report is nearly 200 pages. In it, the Baltimore Police Department's failures mostly center on staffing, decision-making, and communication.
8 weeks after the Brooklyn Day mass shooting, the worst mass shooting in Baltimore's history, the city releases its after-action report.
We know we made mistakes.
Acting Baltimore Police Commissioner Rich Worley addressing the key shortfalls identified specifically within BPD. Findings in the report detail discretionary officers available to respond to the large crowd were never requested.
But we had over 100 officers available throughout the city.
And overall, cite communication and decision-making failures made by Southern District Command. As a result, Worley says multiple people were served with charging papers, and the district major has been reassigned.
They turned all their findings over to the Public Integrity Bureau. The Public Integrity Bureau has already served some members with charging papers for different charges during the incident. Yesterday, we did put a new major in the Southern District. He was promoted from Captain Jason Bennett, was promoted to captain, was moved to the Southern District, and the major in the Southern District was reassigned.
As for the investigation itself, the report pointing out due to the large area, debris, and people going in and out of their homes that night, it may have been possible to overlook certain pieces of evidence from the initial canvass. The acting commissioner questioned on this, as an arrest has yet to be made for the 2 people murdered on Brooklyn Day. The reward rising to $88,000.
It hasn't hampered the investigation. The only thing that hampered the investigation is we have multiple shooters with over 100 casings that we have to track and put on a drawing that shows where these casings came from. But the investigation hasn't been hampered. I'm not frustrated with the investigation. Our detectives are working around the clock. We still have conference calls to talk about where the investigation is at, and we will be making some arrests. So it is something that I wish we could go faster, but you can't force an investigation to go any quicker than the evidence and the manpower.
The acting commissioner there seemingly alluding to more arrests to have been made, but again, no one has been held accountable for the 2 homicides. Now, Worley is in the midst of the confirmation process to officially be named BPD's next commissioner. Today, the mayor was questioned if this incident and the findings in this report should disqualify him from the job.
This was like a few days in for the commissioner, right? And he understands and knows what's happening there. But what this report outlines for you and outlines for everybody is what happened and what should have happened and who should have acted, and we'll be holding those folks accountable. What would be disqualifying for the commissioner is nothing is there. There are no internal affairs things from him in his past. There are no misconduct and allegations. There is no inability for him to lead this department.
Now, BPD also released footage from an officer's body-worn camera. In this, it shows the officer responding and rendering aid to the 20-year-old man who was killed in this mass shooting. Now, in this report, there was concern raised over a lack of body-worn camera footage, specifically from police completing calls for service throughout that day. The report calling this a potential policy violation that we'll be asking more questions about. Alexa Ashwell, Fox 45 News.
Alexa, thank you. We have early reactions to the report. Baltimore City Council member Mark Conway, who chairs the council's Public Safety Committee, said the findings underscore his conviction that BPD and the Housing Authority should have known more about the event before it occurred and should have acted sooner before it spiraled out of control. Conway added to see that police department personnel were aware of the growing crowds but took minimal action is beyond disappointing. And for the fact that HABC staff was unaware of an hours-long event on their property with hundreds of people until early the next morning suggests gaps in communication that must be addressed going forward.
Well, Senate President Bill Ferguson also issued a joint statement with other lawmakers. They wrote, "It's clear the extent of the violence could have been prevented or at least mitigated." They go on to say the work must continue to focus urgently on reducing youth violence and reducing access to firearms for those who seek to harm our communities.
The police union is also weighing in Baltimore. The FOP president says the poor decisions of politicians and ex-police commissioner Michael Harrison led us to where we are today. The statement goes on to say unless there are bold moves made to retain the current complement of officers and recruit new ones, they fear these horrible incidents will continue to happen.
Well, Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost continues our live team coverage while demanding accountability for Monzi's role, including Safe Streets. Mackenzie questioning leaders about what needs to change. Mackenzie, what are you learning?
Yeah, well, Mary, there's really little accountability coming from the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, and learning what we're learning from this report really underscores how little we know about how the Safe Streets program operates and what's expected from these violence interrupters.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today.
Taking a deep dive into the more than 170-page after-action report, you'll find the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement's response. Plenty of praise for the 45-day coordinated neighborhood stabilization response and a laundry list of nonprofit providers offering services after shots were fired. The pages confirming what we've been reporting. The Safe Streets workers don't have policies in place to notify anyone of a potential threat. Monzi says the 5 conflicts mediated by Safe Streets workers prior to the shooting, which some did involve weapons, were not out of the norm of their daily course of duty. Where did those mediations take place, and is there any indication that the people involved in those mediations were either victims or suspects in the shooting?
I can't say whether these incidents involved victims or suspects in the incident, but what I can say is that from thorough conversations with our staff, these incidents were considered mediated, and so there was not an indication that this was a scene that was about to boil over.
We followed up with Monzi asking several questions, including if Monzi knew the details of the conflicts and couldn't share them or it wasn't known. Monzi telling Fox 45 News it is unaware of the mediations having involved suspects and or victims of Brooklyn Day. Changes to reporting policies for Safe Streets workers are in the works, like when an event has more than 50 people in a Safe Street zone, if there are known groups who have had previous issues at the event, or if there is a suspicion of people with multiple weapons in one place, like at the Brooklyn Day event, when no information was reported by Safe Streets workers to anyone in management.
We want to make sure that we're able, moving forward, to have very strong intelligence between Safe Streets and the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement so that we have the proper situational awareness.
But when remains the question. In July, Monzi's staff told Fox 45 News it was assessing the internal escalation protocols to inform Monzi when incidents emerge that may be outside their scope of work or require additional resources. That was last month. We're still here talking about the idea of possibly implementing that. How much longer will the community wait for these changes to be made?
We're making changes immediately. The recommendations include a proposed policy, and so we're in the process right now of finalizing that.
But do you have a timeline for when those changes will actually be implemented?
As I mentioned, we have proposed language right now, and so we're looking to finalize that in the coming weeks.
Mavronis says conversations are happening now with Safe Streets sites before any new policy is implemented. But nearly 2 months after the shooting, little change implemented, and leaders of the city's flagship community violence intervention program praised their response to what's being called one of the most painful chapters in Baltimore's history. I also asked Monzi if the public will see the documentation the Safe Streets workers used to track those mediations before the shooting actually took place. So far, Monzi has yet to respond. We're live in the newsroom. Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
Mackenzie, thank you. Well, in the wake of the shooting, the Housing Authority of Baltimore has also been heavily criticized for allowing the party to happen in the first place. Agency leaders saying they were not aware Brooklyn Day was taking place despite this scene at Brooklyn Homes. Hundreds of people gathering in the community without a permit.
Our staff went home on Friday at 3 o'clock. They were not due back to the site until Tuesday morning, 8 o'clock. Unless someone used the 800 number to notify the emergency services that this was going on, there was no way for us to know what is happening on the site. Should we have known? Of course.
Well, the agency says it's now providing overnight armed security at Brooklyn Homes. They're also working to educate residents about emergency protocols like calling a hotline to report large, potentially dangerous events like the Brooklyn Day party.
The Fox 45 News confirmed a 36-year-old from West Baltimore personally transported and paid for the rental of several party items at Brooklyn Day, including this U-Haul seen at the party. When pressed on whether there would be any consequences for the party's planning, the president of the Housing Authority says no one will be evicted. The Housing Authority is working on new guidelines to hold people who break rules accountable.
Well, just yesterday, the mother of the 18-year-old who died in the Brooklyn Day mass shooting confronted the mayor and acting police commissioner. She addressed the failures.
I had people from that community almost begging the police to come there. No one responded. Dispatch started begging police to send someone out there. Nobody responded. And then I heard you say, by the time we got here, the incident had already occurred, but it didn't. It did not have to occur.
Well, those heartbreaking comments are in response to 911 dispatch audio from the night of the shooting, saying the situation might have needed a National Guard response.
And I have an armed person call at 819 Gretna Court. Hundreds of males and females are armed with guns and knives at the location.
We might have to redirect that call to the National Guard then.
It's been 59 days since the mass shooting happened. Since that time, city leaders have only spent about an hour and 45 minutes across 3 news conferences addressing it to the public. In that time, reporters have had about an hour to ask questions. At those 3 news conferences, reporters from all local and some national news outlets have had only the chance to ask 55 questions. That's 28 people shot, 2 people who were killed, but less than 2 hours spent addressing the tragedy in the last 2 months.
Well, we want you to join this conversation. Do you think the city is being fully transparent with the investigation into the Brooklyn Day mass shooting? To vote, head to foxbaltimore.com/vote.
Now, looking ahead, the Baltimore City Council will hold a second hearing into the mass shooting next month. It's happening in 2 weeks from today, September 13th. A week after that, the council will take up the confirmation of Acting Police Commissioner Richard Worley.
A natural gas leak shuts down part of downtown Baltimore as the busy commute continues. What we know about this breaking news coming up next.
And devastating Idalia continues its move across the southeastern U.S. I'm going to let you know what we could see out of the storm as it moves east and eventually out into the Atlantic, and if that's going to impact your Labor Day holiday forecast. And my Weather Authority forecast coming up.
Fox 45 News, winner of 16 2022 Regional Emmy Awards, more than all other Baltimore news stations combined.
We are following some breaking news from downtown Baltimore right now. A natural gas line has forced a part of Light Street to shut down. The fire department has cornered off the section between Lombard and Baltimore streets, traffic being rerouted in that area away from this danger. The fire department says their work may last into the early morning tomorrow.
And this is a live look right now. This is a live look right now at South Carolina. This is Kiowa Island. South Carolina has a number of barrier islands. Defusky Island, Kiowa Island are kind of barrier islands, and they actually kind of helped storm surge from hitting the mainland of the state. But you can see that surface already churned up all right now from Idalia. The storm is weakened to a Category 1 hurricane with wind speeds of up to 75 miles an hour in some areas. After making landfall in the state of Florida this morning, the hurricane has traveled east over the state of Georgia and again into the Carolinas, leaving a path of destruction behind it.
Well, take a look at this. Some of the damage caused by the storm in Florida. The heavy wind, rain, and storm surge led to massive flooding. Streets completely submerged in some parts of the state where the storm made landfall as a Category 3 hurricane this morning.
And on the left, that's video taken inside of a home as a tree fell on top of it. You can see it come down on the roof and damage the ceiling inside that house. Look at that, those big Carolina pines.
Just crashing down. Well, right now, Hurricane Idalia is moving over southern Georgia. Georgia's governor has announced a state of emergency to free up state resources and personnel. Idalia has weakened to, as Kai just mentioned, Category 1. But the governor says people still need to take it seriously.
It's a dangerous storm. People need to prepare. They need to be ready when it's coming through and either, move a county or two up if they have the ability to do that. If not, make sure they're in a secure location.
Downed trees and power outages have been reported across southern Georgia. Officials expect the storm to weaken to a tropical storm by tonight.
And of course, we're looking at our weather here.
Yes, it's not a bad day today, actually. Started with a little rain.
Yeah, well, one of our producers actually said, why is this bad weather not coming here? We've got all this tropical weather, cold front. And that cold front came through earlier this morning with the rain.
That's our buffer.
We'll take that rain
anything
over what they're getting down to the south. These cold fronts act like linebackers when it comes to these major tropical systems. And if you have a strong enough cold front, it will just bat this thing away. And that's exactly what's happening. You see down here, HD radar, that's the outer edges of Idalia. Down toward Virginia Beach, south of Petersburg in Virginia. Look at this huge mess. Devastation all the way across portions of the Big Bend of Florida, making landfall early this morning along that northern coast of Florida, the Gulf Coast, and then moving its way inland over Valdosta, Georgia, and now approaching Savannah, Georgia, and eventually moving back off the coast. Notice how close the rain comes up to almost the southern Delmarva. South of that, there could be 1, 2, 3, 4 inches of rain over the next 24 to 36 hours. Eventually, this does move offshore and continues to weaken as a tropical storm. Still going to be pushing water toward our coastline. Along with this, Franklin, actually a bigger player in our weather due to the beach conditions. This has been sitting out here churning, actually giving tropical storm conditions to portions of Bermuda today. That will eventually weaken, but still throwing back some water once again all the way through the day tomorrow. Look at those seas running about 5 to 7 feet. The waves going to be pretty frisky here right along Ocean City all the way up to Rehoboth as well as Bethany Beach. And we're still going to have that pretty big wave action as we head into Friday as well. So end of the week beach trips, if you're getting there early, I think we could have some rough conditions as well as potentially some even minor coastal flooding and some rip current. So keep that in mind in the back of your head. But by Saturday and Sunday, those seas do begin to come down as Franklin moves away, and we're only down to about 3 and 4 foot seas by then. So things are going to be improving in terms of the beach conditions. Outside of that, dry skies pretty much statewide, and that will continue all the way through the weekend. Right now, 87. This is a Hayden Bridge at Havre de Grace on our traffic camera network, looking nice and dry. Winds into the west-northwest at 10. Feels like temperatures actually below the actual temperatures as the humidity falls off. There is our savior, the cold front, moving through, taking all the tropical weather, pushing it down to our south and east. And really the closest that this stuff is going to get is probably, again, just south of the Delmarva. Again, beautiful skies setting up, aside from some high clouds spraying north from Idalia, and that will continue overnight into tomorrow morning. Even look here, maybe a couple of showers on this computer model south of Delaware into tomorrow morning. Then that moves east and a gorgeous day ensues. Still going to be breezy, 83, dry, comfy day for Friday, 83, near average Saturday. Big warming trend. Look, by Labor Day, we could be in the mid to upper 90s and could even threaten records into early next week. Pools may be closed, but summer is not over. Tuesday, Wednesday, mid to upper 90s potentially.
Thank you. Continuing coverage on the Brooklyn Homes shooting. We're talking with a government accountability organization about what we've learned and where the new report falls short. Cancellations led to students showing up late or missing their first day of school entirely. How the Howard County School Superintendent is addressing a string of busing failures.
It's very unacceptable. Finding out that the bus drivers did not practice the route, that is not a good representation of what we're dealing with.
If he's doing all that and disrupting the lives of our children and their education, we think he should be held accountable.
Howard County parents fed up with the failing bus routes. They say they were suddenly told their kids' routes were canceled, leaving them stranded. Some parents now calling for accountability from the school system's top officials. Fox 45's Olivia Dance was there as the superintendent addressed the failures.
20 bus routes across Howard County are impacted by these transportation troubles. The superintendent unable to say when those buses will be back in service, but says they're working nonstop here at district headquarters to resolve those issues. Superintendent Michael Martirano says new drivers are already being trained to restore the suspended routes, and there will be a thorough audit of the transportation office. He says they've already identified errors that could have been mitigated. Some of those errors were in the data and routes provided to contractors, causing drivers to get lost, and also contractor technology issues. The school district says their new bus contractor, Zoom Transportation, based out of California, had 20 drivers call out. As a result, 20 bus routes are temporarily suspended. I asked the superintendent if he now regrets his decision to sign a contract with Zoom, a contractor that accounts for more than half the school system's total bus budget. Take a listen to what he said.
The last several years, having 95 to 105 vacancies every year is not acceptable either. So we wanted to implement a different delivery with a different contract that had access to a national body of individuals who could come in and support us as bus drivers.
He says the contract was an effort to combat bus driver vacancies, which continues to be a problem already in the first week of this new school year. Superintendent Martirano says he is evaluating all their bus contractors and a full audit will be complete. In the meantime, a petition has surfaced on social media with over 500 signatures calling for the superintendent's resignation, and he's addressing those concerns.
I expect that, and I'm fully accountable to the parents of this community, and I demonstrate the continued confidence of leading this system for 7 years by my demonstrated commitment to our children, and I move forward by doing that work that is necessary for our kids.
The district says 2,400 students are impacted by those 20 bus routes being suspended, but despite that, the attendance rate for those students is still at 94% as the community and parents are stepping up. Reporting in Howard County, I'm Olivia Dance, Fox 45 News.
Well, if your family experiences any issues with school bus systems, we'd love to hear about it. Send us information and relevant photos or videos to the email address on your screen, news@foxbaltimore.com. Voters are again expressing concern over the president's age, how older candidates are shaping the 2024 presidential race. Is the new report enough for Baltimore residents? The continued concerns over the Brooklyn Day shooting.
The only way that we can begin to heal the trauma is to begin by focusing on accountability. accountability for those who committed the crime, accountability for the police or anyone who showed indifference, accountability for city government that made missteps.
We had over 100 officers available throughout the city that we could have moved there in a short period of time. We could have done so many things differently that could have helped with a different outcome, but we didn't. And those who didn't do that will be held accountable.
The after-action report on the Brooklyn Day mass shooting has been released.
Yes, the mayor, acting police commissioner, and other city leaders admitting their failures in the response before the party and after the shooting, saying the violence that killed 2 people and injured 28 others could have been stopped.
Here's some key findings in that report. At least one Baltimore police unit was aware of the event 3 days in advance. However, high-ranking officials who could have provided extra support didn't know about the party until 20 minutes before the shooting happened.
The report also highlighting officer indifference as a serious concern. Monsey leaders say it is also reevaluating its protocol for when Safe Streets workers should communicate a potential public safety threat to City Hall, but have not said when those changes may go into effect. Now, the after-action report is drawing a lot of reaction tonight. Fox 45's Keith Daniels live now with what he's been hearing even before today's announcement. Keith?
Well, Mary, one of the voices that's resonating across the city is the mother of one of the people killed in that mass shooting, her 18-year-old daughter gunned down. Now, we heard that mother's emotional response to the deadly incident hours before the release of the action report. Crystal Gonzalez, mother of 18-year-old Idalia Gonzalez, was at last night's community meeting with the mayor and acting police commissioner Richard Worley, the last city town hall before his confirmation hearing. She pressed the mayor and his nominee for police commissioner about the lack of response to the mass shooting minutes before the gunfire. The heartbroken mother told both city leaders that city police were not there when the police in that community needed them.
I heard police officers said this is a job for the National Guard. No one responded.
Yep.
I had people from that community almost begging the police to come there. No one responded. Dispatch started begging police to send someone out there. Nobody responded. And then I heard you say, by the time we got here, the incident had already occurred, but it didn't. It did not have to occur.
Well, the mother's comments are in response to 911 dispatch audio from the night of that shooting, also obtained by Fox 45 News. We heard audio from police and some saying the situation might have needed a National Guard response. Reporting tonight, Keith Daniels, Fox 45 News.
Keith, thank you. Community groups are calling for accountability at City Hall.
That's right. We are joined by Yuripsi Morgan, representative for the Government Accountability Group, Peace. Thank you so much for talking with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Ms. Morgan, we've been waiting to report this for roughly 2 months now, and finally we're learning where city agencies believe they failed. In this report, this after-action report, what stands out to you? And I want to remind our viewers that you're an attorney as well, and so you're skilled at looking at the details.
Yeah, listen, I think that that report, although it's long overdue, is very welcome because we finally get more information about what happened. It is heartbreaking to see all of these agencies that failed at one time, but, you know, one of the things that was most shocking to me, and we kind of got a hint of this during the city council meeting shortly after the shooting occurred, is that the Safe Streets groups has little to no accountability. And if they're actually talking about implementing some method by which they should call the police, why was that not already the case? We know that there are several Safe Street workers, at that location on that night, and even broke up 5 fights. But they apparently don't have a protocol to call police if it starts to get out of hand. That's crazy.
Right, some kind of protocol, at least that message gets to police. Now, the mayor has called this one of the worst shootings in Baltimore history. It is, but there really have only been 2 press conferences, maybe 3, to update the public on the investigation. Does Peace believe the city is being fully transparent?
No. You know, transparency is going to require a lot more communication. Now, I do applaud the mayor for, seemingly backing up this idea of transparency and making sure that these organizations are held accountable. But let's not forget, one of these organizations, Monsey, was his pet project, along with Safe Streets. So people are demanding more accountability, more visibility from them, and we're still not seeing it.
And Ms. Morgan, we understand Safe Streets workers were on the scene before and after the shooting, but Monzi won't say if people involved in their mediations before the violence were victims or suspects, calling them successful mediations. How do you think the city can classify them as successful if they may have been involved in the mass shooting in the incident later that night? And again, we're not suggesting that was the case, but we don't know.
Well, that's the biggest issue, right, is that we don't know. And during that city council meeting that I attended along with Juvenile Patterson, who is the president of our organization, we heard all the back and forth between the director of Monzi, the interim director of Monzi, between Catholic Charities that helps run the organization, and basic questions that were asked were unanswered. And let's remember, this is a taxpayer-funded organization. Everybody deserves the answers, and it's for no other reason than to make sure that this kind of thing never happens again and to hold people accountable when it does.
All right, Euripsy Morgan, thank you so much for joining us tonight, giving us your perspective. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
For our full coverage on the Brooklyn home shooting, the after-action report, and more, head to our website, foxbaltimore.com.
First on Fox, a vote of no confidence within the Baltimore County Fire Department. The union vote named the fire chief, the assistant fire chief, and deputy chief. Only the fire chief narrowly survived that vote. Rebecca Pryor spoke to the fire union president today. She's live with the very latest on what happened. Rebecca?
Well, Mary, in addition to that vote, we also uncovered this internal report that details a laundry list of widespread issues from within the department. This is from the fire union, of course, and they tell me this is more than just a matter of poor morale for firefighters. The issues that are in this document are also a matter of public safety. Sounding the alarm on a fire department allegedly plagued with problems.
It's been brewing probably for a while.
Baltimore County's fire union issuing this 16-page report detailing widespread issues and concerns within the department following a rare vote of no confidence. Chief Joanne Rund barely surviving the vote, while union members overwhelmingly delivering a vote of no confidence against Assistant Chief Jennifer Utz and Deputy Chief Francis DePaula. Are you calling for their resignation by this vote?
So our vote and the intentions, I believe, of the membership is not for anybody to lose their job or their position.
According to Union President John Sabiga, there's room for changes to be made before a change in leadership is necessary. But he says improvements need to be made immediately.
The morale's pretty low right now. There's a lot of issues that are going on.
Among the most egregious allegations leading to what the union is calling a toxic environment, a lack of respect, trust, and consistency between chief officers and members. Chief officers caught lying in discipline hearings and falsifying documents, as well as unsafe tactical decisions made by chief officers that have led to increased property damage and near misses to personnel.
It seems to be heavy-handed, very significant penalties or discipline imposed.
It's more than just heavy-handed. Members are calling it bullying and harassment.
They do. It just seems like it's an incredible amount of scrutiny that happens.
Current recruitment practices, another major issue coming under fire. The report claiming applicants who are not physically fit have been assisted and selected to make up numbers for diversity in a job where physical fitness could cost lives.
Our physical ability test is probably minimal at best and lacking in a lot of ways.
The thoroughness of background checks also being called into question with accusations that a convicted felon spent time on the force.
I'm not really sure how that slipped through the cracks, but that is accurate.
Additionally, the report says a lack of training for EMS and fire staff could be putting those fighting the flames and the public safety at risk.
It's concerning in that because the public may not always be in the best care that we could if we were doing additional training.
In response to the report, County Executive Johnny Olszewski seemingly throwing his support behind the current chief, sending a statement to FOX45 reading in part, quote, Chief Rund continues to lead critical efforts to strengthen and modernize the Baltimore County Fire Department. Olszewski going on to say he's taking the concerns seriously and will assist in exploring opportunities for improvement.
I hope they just don't discount the vote of no confidence and just say, well, it doesn't mean anything. That would only lead to bigger problems.
And we, of course, reached out to Chief Rund for comment on this issue as well. But as of news time tonight, I have not heard back. Reporting live in Baltimore County, Rebecca Pryor, Fox 45 News.
Thank you, Rebecca. Another teen is arrested after being accused of stealing a car in Anne Arundel County. Police responded to a hit and run in Glen Burnie yesterday morning. Around 8:30, a stolen vehicle hit a second car near Ingalls Road and Saunders Way. The driver of the stolen car ran away, but was later caught. Police say that suspect is 15 years old.
Well, the crash comes just days after police say an 11-year-old crashed a stolen car in Baltimore. In this video, you can see the man who was hit holding the child at the scene until police arrives. The officers eventually decide to release the boy to his mother without any form of punishment, saying he's too young to be charged under the state's juvenile justice laws.
60 Baltimore City students completed a first-of-its-kind free summer learning program inspired by a FOX45 report. The students, for 90 minutes a day, 4 days a week, 5 weeks, were given free tutoring from Sylvan Learning. All the tutoring focused on math, with the goal of preparing students for the start of the year by limiting summer learning loss and ensuring that love for learning doesn't take off.
If we help 1, 10, 20, 30 of them over the course of the year be stronger and go further and succeed, it's a win.
Tonight on Fox 45 News at 10 o'clock, the plan Sylvan has for the free program next summer. Hurricane Idalia is moving across the south, the latest on the destruction it's causing.
The White House pushing back against concerns President Biden may be too old for another term. I'm Scott Thuman in Washington with both sides coming up.
And Idalia remaining to our south for now, so that means some dry weather for getting that lawn mowed. 86 at 5 p.m., 6 p.m. temperature at 84 and 79 at 7. Actually could use some rain. We're running in a drought again. I'm going to let you know if Idalia has any plans on making a visit to Maryland. To my Weather Authority forecast.
Making headlines, another concerning moment for Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell as he appears to freeze during a news conference in Kentucky.
What are my thoughts about what?
Running for re-election in 2026.
That's
hear the question, Senator? Running for re-election in 2026? All right, I'm sorry, you all. We're going to need a minute.
Well, Senator McConnell of Kentucky paused for more than 30 seconds, but recovered and responded briefly to a few more questions. A spokesperson says he felt momentarily lightheaded, and the senator will see a doctor as a prudent measure. This comes a little more than a month after the Republican froze in a similar way at the U.S. Capitol. The 81-year-old senator has fallen multiple times this year and has suffered a concussion. Well, how old is too old? That's a question many are debating right now when it comes to the presidency. Sinclair's chief political correspondent Scott Thuman takes a look at both sides of the debate and whether or not age is only a number.
For an 80-year-old president asking for another 4 years, his age now a central conversation. Can Biden keep the pace needed for the job? A majority of voters aren't so sure. 77% of adults surveyed think Biden is simply too old to be effective for another term, much higher than the 51% who feel the same way about Donald Trump, who is 77. CNN pressing the White House about that concern this week.
Joe Biden's been in politics since before, literally since before you were born.
Back when we were marking the 1-year anniversary of the war in Ukraine, he went to Kyiv. And people were so impressed that he was able to be there and look strong.
I'm not saying he's not able to walk.
No, but you're talking about his strength, right? You're talking about how he's looking right now. That is.
And Republicans hoping to take his job are seizing on that.
A vote for Joe Biden is a vote for Kamala Harris. You know that, and I know that. There is no way that Joe Biden's going to finish his term. I think Kamala Harris is going to be the next president, and that should send a chill up every American's spine.
Fueling speculation Biden may not be on the ticket? A planned Fox News debate between current candidate Republican Governor Ron DeSantis against Democrat California Governor Gavin Newsom, who is not in the race, but mentioned as a potential backup for Biden.
You think it could be Newsom?
He's waiting in the wings. I think a lot of people are waiting in the wings.
In his soon-to-be-released book called The Last Politician, the author Franklin Foer citing unparalleled insider access when writing his public persona reflected physical decline and time's doling of mental faculties that no pill or exercise regime can resist. The White House insisting that President Biden's drive is hard for even them and reporters as well to keep up with, and therefore, at least publicly, it shouldn't be a concern. In Washington, I'm Scott Thuman.
And we're giving you a live look again at Kiowa Island in South Carolina. That is just outside of Charleston, South Carolina, as we continue to track Hurricane Idalia. That storm has now weakened to a Category 1, which is some good news. However, it is still bringing heavy rain and winds, and they are always concerned about storm surge. And this is a look at what communities in Florida were dealing with this morning. Idalia made landfall there early today as a Category 3 storm with wind speeds of 125 miles an hour. Now, according to Power Outage US, more than 270,000 people in the state still don't have power. Another 200,000 are dealing with outages in the state of Georgia, which has also been impacted by Idalia.
Yeah, and Idalia actually reached briefly a Category 4 over the Gulf before it did make that landfall at about 7:45 this morning along the Big Bend of Florida as a Category 3 storm. And there are the outer bands associated with the system right around right here, Franklin, in southern portions of Virginia. Then there's all the advisories associated with this, even some of the marine advisories fairly close to us. You see this, a small craft advisory that's all the way up portions of the Chesapeake Bay. And then there's also this area in green. What that is our coastal flood warnings that are coastal flood advisories, rather, that are in effect with some of the easterly wind flow, not only around Idalia, but also around what is Hurricane Franklin, and we'll get into that in a second. But Idalia now, a Category 1 hurricane, winds still at 75 miles an hour. It looks like it makes that curve, as predicted, down toward south and southeast, getting as close as maybe the extreme lower Delmarva in terms of its rain and maybe some breezy impacts. But again, a little farther wide expanding and expansiveness is the potential of some high seas as well as rip currents. And that's also aided by Franklin, which is a Category 2 hurricane that's moving its way right around the area of Bermuda, just kind of curving around the island. So there are tropical storm warnings out for that area. It's going to be very far away from our coastline. You just see the MORE from the Baltimore marker way out on the western side of the map. But it's sending surges of water, of waves down toward our coastline. So folks that may have some early Labor Day beach plans, maybe some trips planned out for the end of the week into the very, very, very early weekend, still going to be dealing with the potential of rip currents. So look at some of those seas just offshore, 5 to 8, maybe 10 feet. So that's going to mean some waves of about 3 to 5 feet. And again, maybe some limited coastal flooding. By Saturday, Sunday, that should begin to come down. Then there's also Tropical Depression 11 gradually moving its way over portions of the open Atlantic. That does not look like it's going to have any impacts on land. So taking a look outside right now, the Hayden Bridge, Havre de Grace, 87 degrees, winds out of the dry west and northwest at 10 miles an hour. Saving grace, this cold front bringing in dry air, keeping all the tropics staved away from us. Again, just those outer impacts towards the beaches. But that is about it. Future Scan says overnight tonight into early tomorrow morning, there could be a few patchy clouds. And we've got the blue supermoon that's going on this evening. So try to check that out if you can peer between some of these high clouds. Some rain down towards, say, maybe Ocean City southbound early tomorrow morning. But outside of that, that's all we see out of Idalia. And then tomorrow's another nice day, even cooler as we go to 83 and dry on Friday. Breezes dying down over the weekend. And it looks like some big heat could build in, maybe threatening records as we head through Labor Day on Monday and into early next week.
Well, coming up on Fox 45 News at 5 o'clock, Baltimore police released new video showing the moments after 28 people were shot in South Baltimore. What a new report on the Brooklyn Day mass shooting reveals. Is it safe to save money by getting baby goods secondhand? There are a few things that you should know when you try to do that.
All right, planning out ahead into our Labor Day holiday weekend. Look at this. It's like we turned the future scan off. We have no clouds for our day on Friday, although still some outer impacts from what's left of the tropics way out in the Atlantic. At that point, could have, again, potential of some beach hazards. We're talking about 4 to 5 foot seas out Ocean City way. Potentially could have some rip currents. It's going to be hard not to go in the water here with this beautiful azure blue sky across all of our areas. So keep that in mind. Otherwise, it looks like a great looking weekend through Saturday as we head into Sunday as well. Maybe a couple of patchy clouds, but that's when the heat really is going to begin to build. Take a look at that weekend forecast, getting away for the big Labor Day holiday forecast. 83 for Friday. Saturday, when the mid 80s near average, 91 on Sunday, potentially mid 90s for Labor Day on Monday. And if you're going to be headed out to the beaches Saturday and Sunday, again, I think the waves will be dying down by then. High temperatures in the mid 70s to near 80 degrees and water temperatures in the low to mid 70s. A really nice weekend to get away, to wrap up summer, to head to the beach or the pool.
All right, Jonathan, thank you. Coming up on Fox 45 News at 5 o'clock, what went wrong? The new report detailing failures in public safety on the 30 people who were shot in South Baltimore at the Brooklyn Day mass shooting. Also, a vote of no confidence within the Baltimore County Fire Department, who was targeted, and the results.
A new report highlighting the failures among city agencies during Baltimore's largest mass shooting. How leaders are responding tonight.
In Baltimore County, a vote of no confidence within the fire department. We'll hear directly from the fire union president.
This is going to be devastating, I think, for at least a couple days.
Recovery efforts in Florida after Hurricane Idalia tears through the Sunshine State. How officials are responding as the storm heads towards the Carolinas.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 5.
There were individuals who made the cowardly, reckless decision to pull the trigger that night with any regard for human lives around them, and we will not rest until we hold all of them accountable.
Well, the first after-action report is now out surrounding the Brooklyn Homes mass shooting. Thank you for staying with us. I'm Kai Jackson.
And I'm Mary Bubala. Almost 2 months after Baltimore's worst mass shooting, which left 2 dead, 28 others injured, city agencies are addressing the massive failures that unfolded that day and night.
And tonight, important questions about how the event seemingly happened under the radar.
Fox 45 News following the 3 levels of failures that day, coming from the Baltimore Police Department, the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, and the Housing Authority.
We have live team coverage covering all angles of this story. Mackenzie Frost takes a closer look at the role Safe Streets workers played and why none of the workers who was at the party, or excuse me, at the day of the shooting, warned police of possible threats.
And we begin, though, with Alexa Ashwell and more on the failures within the Baltimore Police Department that they're admitting to. Alexa?
Yes, Kai, Mary, this report is nearly 200 pages. In it, the Baltimore Police Department's failures mostly center on staffing, decision-making, and communication.
8 weeks after the Brooklyn Day mass shooting, the worst mass shooting in Baltimore's history, the city releases its after-action report.
We know we made mistakes.
Acting Baltimore Police Commissioner Rich Worley addressing the key shortfalls identified specifically within BPD. Findings in the report detail discretionary officers available to respond to the large crowd were never requested.
But we had over 100 officers available throughout the city.
And overall, cite communication and decision-making failures made by Southern District Command. As a result, Worley says multiple people were served with charging papers, and the district major has been reassigned.
They turned all their findings over to the Public Integrity Bureau. The Public Integrity Bureau has already served some members with charging papers for different charges during the incident. Yesterday, we did put a new major in the Southern District. He was promoted from Captain Jason Bennett, was promoted to captain, was moved to the Southern District, and the major in the Southern District was reassigned.
As for the investigation itself, the report pointing out due to the large area, debris, and people going in and out of their homes that night, it may have been possible to overlook certain pieces of evidence from the initial canvass. The acting commissioner questioned on this, as an arrest has yet to be made for the 2 people murdered on Brooklyn Day. The reward rising to $88,000.
It hasn't hampered the investigation. The only thing that hampered the investigation is we have multiple shooters with over 100 casings that we have to track and put on a drawing that shows where these casings came from. But the investigation hasn't been hampered. I'm not frustrated with the investigation. Our detectives are working around the clock. We still have conference calls to talk about where the investigation is at, and we will be making some arrests. So it is something that I wish we could go faster, but you can't force an investigation to go any quicker than the evidence and the manpower.
So the acting commissioner there seemingly alluding to more arrests. 2 have been made, but again, no one has been held accountable for the 2 homicides. Now, Worley is in the midst of the confirmation process to officially be named BPD's next commissioner. Today, the mayor was questioned if this incident and the findings in this report should disqualify him from the job.
This was like a few days in for the commissioner, right? And he understands and knows what's happening there. But what this report outlines for you and outlines for everybody is what happened and what should have happened and who should have acted, and we'll be holding those folks accountable. What would be disqualifying for the commissioner is nothing is there. There are no internal affairs things from him in his past. There are no misconduct and allegations. There is no inability for him to lead this department.
BPD also released footage from an officer's body-worn camera. In it, it shows an officer responding to and rendering aid to the 20-year-old male victim who was killed in this mass shooting. Now, in this report, there was concern raised over a lack of body-worn camera footage, specifically from police completing calls for service throughout that day. The report calling this a potential policy violation that we'll be asking more questions about. Alexa Ashwell, Fox 45 News.
Alexa, thank you. We have early reaction to the report. Baltimore City Council member Mark Conway, who chairs the council's Public Safety Committee, said the findings underscore his conviction that BPD and the Housing Authority should have known more about this event before it occurred and should have acted sooner before it spiraled out of control. He added to see that the police department personnel were aware of the growing crowds, but took minimal action is beyond disappointing. And for the fact that HABC staff were unaware of an hours-long event on their property with hundreds of people until early the next morning suggests gaps in communication that must be addressed going forward.
Senate President Bill Ferguson also issued a joint statement with other lawmakers. They wrote, "It's clear the extent of the violence could have been prevented or at least mitigated." They go on to say the work must continue to focus urgently on reducing youth violence and reducing access to firearms for those who seek to harm our communities.
And the police union also weighing in. The FOP president saying the poor decisions of politicians and ex-police commissioner Michael Harrison led us to where we are today. The statement goes on to say, unless there are bold moves made to retain the current complement of officers and recruit new ones, they fear these horrible incidents will continue to happen.
Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost continues our live team coverage. While demanding accountability for Monzi's role, including Safe Streets, Mackenzie is questioning leaders about what's changing. Mackenzie, what are you learning?
Well, Kai, we know that there's really little accountability coming from the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. In this report, really underscores just how many questions remain unanswered surrounding how the Safe Streets program operates and what is expected from these violence interrupters.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today.
Taking a deep dive into the more than 170-page after-action report, you'll find the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement's response. Plenty of praise for the 45-day coordinated neighborhood stabilization response and a laundry list of nonprofit providers offering services after shots were fired. The pages confirming what we've been reporting. The Safe Streets workers don't have policies in place to notify anyone of a potential threat. Monzi says the 5 conflicts mediated by Safe Streets workers prior to the shooting, which some did involve weapons, were not out of the norm of their daily course of duty.
Where did those mediations take place, and is there any indication that the people involved in those mediations were either victims or suspects in the shooting?
I can't say whether these incidents involved victims or suspects in the incident, but what I can say is that from thorough conversations with our staff, these incidents were considered mediated, and so there was not an indication that this was a scene that was about to boil over.
We followed up with Monzi asking several questions, including if Monzi knew the details of the conflicts and couldn't share them or it wasn't known. Monzi telling Fox 45 News it is unaware of the mediations having involved suspects and or victims of Brooklyn Day. Changes to reporting policies for Safe Streets workers are in the works, like when an event has more than 50 people in a Safe Street zone, if there are known groups who have had previous issues at the event, or if there is a suspicion of people with multiple weapons in one place, like at the Brooklyn Day event, when no information was reported by Safe Streets workers to anyone in management.
We want to make sure that we're able, moving forward, to have very strong intelligence between Safe Streets and the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement so that we have the proper situational awareness.
But when remains the question. In July, Monzi's staff told Fox 45 News it was assessing the internal escalation protocols to inform Monzi when incidents emerge that may be outside their scope of work or require additional resources. That was last month. We're still here talking about the idea of possibly implementing that. How much longer will the community wait for these changes to be made?
We're making changes immediately. The recommendations include a proposed policy, and so we're in the process right now of finalizing that.
But do you have a timeline for when those changes will actually be implemented?
As I mentioned, we have proposed language right now, and so we're looking to finalize that in the coming weeks.
Mavronis says conversations are happening now with Safe Streets sites before any new policy is implemented. But nearly 2 months after the shooting, little change implemented, and leaders of the city's flagship community violence intervention program praised their response to what's being called one of the most painful chapters in Baltimore's history. Now, I also asked Monzi if the public will be able to see the documents Safe Streets workers used to track those mediations during the conflicts before the shooting took place. Monzi has yet to respond. We're live in the newsroom. Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
Thank you, Mackenzie. In the wake of the shooting, the Housing Authority of Baltimore has been heavily criticized for allowing the party to happen in the first place. Agency leaders say they weren't aware Brooklyn Day was taking place despite this scene at Brooklyn homes. Hundreds of people gathered in the community without a permit.
Our staff went home on Friday at 3 o'clock. They were not due back to the site until Tuesday morning, 8 o'clock. Unless someone used the 800 number to notify the emergency services that this was going on, there was no way for us to know what is happening on the site. Should we have known? Of course.
President Abrams now says they're providing overnight armed security at Brooklyn homes. They're also working to educate residents about emergency protocols, like calling a hotline to report large, potentially dangerous events like the Brooklyn Day Party.
Well, Fox 45 News has confirmed a 36-year-old from West Baltimore personally transported and paid for the rental of several party items at the Brooklyn Day event, including that U-Haul you see right there on your screen. When pressed on whether there would be any consequences for the party's planning, the president of the Housing Authority says no one will be evicted. The Housing Authority is working on some new guidelines to hold people who break their rules accountable.
Yesterday, the mother of the 18-year-old who died in the Brooklyn Day mass shooting confronted the mayor and acting police commissioner. She addressed the failures.
I had people from that community almost begging the police to come there. No one responded. Dispatch started begging police to send someone out there. Nobody responded. And then I heard you say, by the time we got here, the incident had already occurred, but it didn't. It did not have to occur.
Well, those comments are in response to a 911 dispatch audio from the night of the shooting saying the situation might have needed a National Guard response.
And I have an armed person call at 819 Gretna Court. Hundreds of males and females are armed with guns and knives at the location.
We might have to redirect that call to the National Guard then.
It's been 59 days since the mass shooting happened. Since that time, city leaders have only spent about an hour and 45 minutes across 3 news conferences addressing it to the public. During that time, reporters have had about an hour to ask questions. At those 3 news conferences, reporters from all local and some national outlets have had the chance to ask 55 questions. Again, 28 people were shot, 2 were killed, but less than 2 hours spent addressing the tragedy in the last 2 months.
Well, we want you to join the conversation. Do you think the city is being fully transparent with the investigation into the Brooklyn Day mass shooting? To vote, head to foxbaltimore.com/vote.
Looking ahead, the Baltimore City Council will hold a second hearing into the mass shooting next month. That's happening 2 weeks from today, September 13th. After that, the council will take up the confirmation of Acting Commissioner Richard Worley.
Coming up after the break, Baltimore County's fire chief survives a vote of no confidence. The union speaks exclusively with Fox 45 News.
Idalia brings high winds to the state of Georgia after leaving parts of Florida underwater. The recovery efforts underway.
And some coastal flood advisories due to tropical weather across portions of Delaware and maybe even some showers approaching Maryland. I'll let you know how close Idalia's moisture gets to us. That's in my Weather Authority forecast.
First on Fox tonight, a vote of no confidence within the Baltimore County Fire Department.
The vote by the union named the fire chief, the assistant fire chief, and deputy chief. Only the fire chief narrowly survived that vote.
Fox 45's Rebecca Pryor spoke to the fire union president today. So, Rebecca, what are they telling you?
Well, in addition to the vote, we also uncovered this report, an interim report from the union, which details a laundry list of issues from within the department. Among the key issues that they're sounding the alarm on here include accusations of intimidation, harassment, and bullying from chief staff, a lack of training for EMS and fire personnel, as well as some scathing accusations concerning recruitment practices. According to the report, hiring officials let a convicted felon slip through the cracks. We're told that person has since been fired from the department, but concerns over thoroughness of background checks remain. The report also claims, quote, applicants who are not physically fit have been assisted and selected to make up numbers for diversity in the job where physical fitness could cost lives. I spoke with the fire union president about these concerns this evening. He says the longstanding problems revealed in this report are creating more than just a morale issue for the department.
It's concerning in that because the public may not always be in the best care that we could if we were doing additional training, updated training, and things like that.
Are you calling for their resignation by this vote?
So our vote and the intentions, I believe, of the membership is not for anybody to lose their job or their position.
So as you just heard, the union says that there is room for change before a change in leadership is necessary. And of course, we also reached out to Chief Run directly for a comment on these issues today. But as of news time tonight, I have not heard back.
And Rebecca, you also reached out to the county executive, John Olszewski, about these scathing allegations. What did he say, if at all, anything?
Well, it seems as though County Executive Johnny Olszewski is still throwing his support behind the current chief. Take a look at this statement that a member of his staff sent us today. It reads in part, Chief Run continues to lead critical efforts to strengthen and modernize the Baltimore County Fire Department. Olszewski goes on to say he's taking these concerns seriously and will assist in exploring opportunities for improvement. Reporting live in Baltimore County, Rebecca Pryor, Fox 45 News.
Florida officials assessing the damage as Hurricane Idalia rolled through the state after making landfall on Gulf Coast communities. Governor Ron DeSantis says the state is in recovery mode, working to restore power and clean debris and reopen bridges.
One thing of this, the storm moved a little bit faster than some of the other ones have moved. I mean, some of these things will just dump water and they go, so slow. This one moved a little bit faster, which is, at least when you're talking about the flooding, is a little bit better than when they're slow.
Fox 45 News continues to track the impact of the hurricane. These are just some of the videos that we are seeing out of Florida today. It made landfall as a Cat 3 storm, bringing heavy rain and high winds, battering the area. More than 230,000 customers are currently without power after trees and power lines were taken down by winds of more than 110 miles per hour. Now, we're also seeing some astonishing new images of the storm from the International Space Station. Idalia is heading inland and will move up into Georgia and then the Carolinas by the end of the week. Forecasters predict it will be downgraded to a tropical storm. Let's bring in Chief Meteorologist Jonathan Myers for the track of this storm and its impact.
Yeah, making a huge impact across the Big Bend of Florida, where it made a landfall early this morning at about 7:45 in the morning. And the northern periphery of the moisture with Idalia now up to about Virginia Beach and Elizabeth City. So down into the Outer Banks, that's where they're going to have some problems out of this. We still actually do have the potential of some coastal flooding right around the Delaware coastline, maybe even Ocean City could have up to about a foot inundation in some of the low spots, and also going to have some big crashing waves. And also the potential of rip currents, and that's going to be not only from Idalia, there's also Franklin out there that's pushing water against the coastline. For now, though, all of the big impacts, still some flood watches and some tropical storm warnings across portions of the southeast, basically from Jacksonville northbound all the way up into the Carolinas. Could have some flooding rain, still the potential of still some battering winds as well as waves and some at least limited storm surge. Look at some of these rain totals, 1 to maybe up to 3-4 inches of rain really very close to the Delmarva out of this over the next several days before it eventually weakens and pushes to the east out into the open Atlantic. Then Franklin's not helping out either, although it's still a few hundred miles off the coast and just kind of scraping by Bermuda with potential tropical storm conditions today into tonight. That's still forcing water off to the west. And this is why we have that potential of some higher than average waves. Could run about 3 to 5 feet, maybe 6 feet across Ocean City and the Delaware beaches all the way through Friday before relaxing. You see those bluer colors moving in into Saturday and Sunday, just in time for the weekend. And then there's Tropical Depression 11, which is out in the open Atlantic. That should not affect anyone except the fish. For us, though, gorgeous weather, mostly cloudy skies, 87, winds out of the northwest at 10 behind a cold front. That's really totally been our saving grace out of this. Keeping all of the tropical weather to our south and east. We'll do so for Thursday. Maybe a couple of patchy clouds for tonight into tomorrow as that front continues to amble away down to the south and east and eventually takes all that tropical with it, or tropical weather with it, I should say, heading out into the Atlantic, and then the breezes die down into the weekend and beach conditions also get better too. So overnight into early tomorrow morning, again, a few patchy clouds. There are your showers with Idalia down to the south and east of Denton, way south. I mean, probably south of Ocean City is where we're going to see any real appreciable rain. That will then move east and sunshine is back for tomorrow. Good gusty breeze. High temperatures only right around 80, 83 on Friday. And then the heat picks up into the weekend. 85 on Saturday. Could be up into the 90s Sunday. Labor Day, that could be threatening records, as well as next Monday and Tuesday as the pools close. They're going to have to find somewhere cool to go as we get to the mid to upper 90s next Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday.
Jonathan, thank you. Still ahead tonight, school bus mayhem leaving students stranded in Howard County. The calls to remove the superintendent and how he's responding tonight. The Ravens roster is set. Next, we take you to Owings Mills, where the team is preparing for their first game of the season. The Baltimore Ravens have their initial roster set and will soon turn over to game week mode. Week 1 is a week and a half away. Can't believe it. Morgan Adsit joins us live now from Owings Mills as the Ravens.
Yeah, Mary, the Ravens wrapping up that first practice with the initial 53-man roster. And of course, this roster is going to change all season long. Even this week, we could see some tweaks to it. And on this 53-man roster, the first practice of it, they were a little light today at practice, down 10 players. The biggest name is wide receiver Odell Beckham Jr. This is the last practice of the week. They're off all week. And then next week, it's time for week 1 game day mode. Now on the field, quarterback Lamar Jackson here working out with his center Tyler Linderbaum. So that's always good to see for the fans to ease those nerves. His backup, Tyler Huntley, not on the practice field with the team, but he was off to the side working out with trainers, as well as tight end Mark Andrews doing the same thing. They're both expected to be fine and ready for week 1 against Houston. 2 other players not at practice due to injury, but they are the feel-good story post-cut day is undrafted rookies, running back Keaton Mitchell and Baltimore City native outside linebacker Malik Ham. Both made this team, and it made John Harbaugh's day telling the long shots they are Baltimore Ravens.
It's really, yeah, thank you for that. It's awesome. You have an opportunity to tell guys they made the team, like those 2 young guys that maybe necessarily, I would say they were hoping to, but didn't necessarily expect to, and then they make it. Also guys who made the practice squad. I mean, there's guys making the practice squad who are just thrilled. That was their goal, and that's their foot in the door. So, yeah, those are really fun. There's a lot of hugs. There's a few tears sometimes. There's a lot of laughs usually. So it's all, you know, it's not a bad day. It's not a bad day. It's a good day because, you know, you're just involved in people's lives that way. I kind of cherish the day as a coach, and you're right. That probably makes it, that tops it off.
Now, the Ravens did have some extra players on the field. They're starting to form their practice squad. They're allowed to have 16 players. The Ravens brought back 13 cuts that are now on their practice squad. Wide receiver, the veteran Laquan Treadwell, probably the biggest name, as well as quarterback Anthony Brown. The Ravens did cut and lose cornerback Caillou Kelly. They drafted him in the 5th round just this year, but he has been claimed off waivers by Seattle. John Harbaugh said today the goal was to have him back on the practice squad, but he wishes him well. Reporting live in Owings Mills, I'm Morgan Atzit for Sports Unlimited.
Morgan, thank you. Coming up after the break, failures leading up to the Brooklyn Day mass shooting. Next, a live discussion on what was revealed today. Plus, late and canceled school buses causing headaches in Howard County. How the superintendent is responding tonight.
This mass shooting is one of the most painful chapters in our city's history, which has had more than its fair share of painful chapters. We lost 2 young lives.
The after-action report on the Brooklyn Day mass shooting has been released.
The mayor, acting police commissioner, and other city leaders do admit their failures in the response before the party.
Some key findings in the report. At least one Baltimore police unit was aware of the event 3 days in advance. However, high-ranking officials who could have provided extra support did not know about the party until 20 minutes before the shooting. The report also highlighting officer indifference as a serious concern. Monzi leaders saying it also is evaluating its protocols for when Safe Streets workers should communicate a potential public safety threat to City Hall, but have not said when those changes may go into effect. We want to bring in former federal prosecutor Thuruvik Naraja to weigh in on the report. Thanks for coming in. What are your key takeaways from this report?
Look, it's a long report, but you didn't need 173 pages to say what the title should have been, which is the city should be ashamed of itself. Everything from police indifference to Safe Street workers breaking up fights allegedly, but then leaving and allowing people to stay on the scene with guns. It's just embarrassing. The mayor said it was one of the most painful chapters. It is also one of the most pathetic and shameful chapters in city incompetence and city indifference. Not that we messed up, but that we didn't even care.
Thoreau, I want to get to one issue, and you kind of brought this up, and it's not to beat up on them, but this has been talked about even by former officers, that there's something going on in the city with officers not wanting to get engaged. Some of that, we understand, stems from when Marilyn Mosby was in office and officers feeling between that and the consent decree they were going to get in trouble for doing their jobs. Where do you think this resides? How do we reconcile officers maybe having legitimate concern and also being concerned about the number of people out there, but with providing adequate public safety? How do we reconcile that?
And Kai, I think you're right not to point fingers. This is a national problem. This is a long-standing problem of police apathy. It's not a particularly popular time to be a police officer in America, and particularly in Baltimore, but that means we need to work harder to inspire them, to encourage them, to give them the incentives and supervision and management, to hold them accountable when they mess up and to commend them when they do well. This report basically says officers were motivated by overtime, but even that wasn't enough to go into a crowd of people where violence was on the horizon, where Safe Street workers apparently knew that people with guns were getting into altercations, but the police couldn't be bothered to do anything more.
We know Acting Police Commissioner Richard Worley said today that multiple people have been served charging papers as a result of communication and decision failures. We know the police union speaking out against him holding officers accountable. What do you make of this, and what can the result be?
Look, if you want to take responsibility as a leader. Don't take responsibility at a press conference, but then point fingers at the rank and file for their role in this. The fact that sergeants and lieutenants were aware that there was a major event happening, the fact that they were joking about overtime, the fact that they didn't deploy officers to that scene even after there were warning signs, that is a failure that goes all the way to the top. And the fact that we have just ignored this kind of problem for years, it shouldn't be blamed on individual officers. That is not what being a leader is about.
And Thuruvik, let's talk about transparency. There have only been a couple of press conferences, 3 news conferences actually up to this point, with reporters not really being able to ask as many questions as they would like. The city is saying we want to be transparent. Police are saying we want to be transparent, but there are some who are saying that's simply not happening. What's your takeaway?
We do too much sort of lip service to transparency, but not actually do anything to follow up on it. Not only was this a constricted press conference, it was in the wrong place. This press conference should have happened among the residents in Brooklyn Park. The mayor and the police commissioner should have been apologizing to them, should have been reporting to them for their failures. The fact that this is just political theater and a little bit of a media event when you're at the same time calling it the most painful event in our history, it just doesn't square, and it doesn't make people feel like you really understand their pain and their plight.
All right, Thuruvik Naraja, thanks for coming in, giving us your perspective tonight. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Well, more than a month after the shooting, police arrested 18-year-old Tristan Jackson, directly tied to the shooting. He's facing more than 50 counts, mounting a potential maximum sentence of more than 800 years behind bars. But he's not accused of firing the fatal shots and instead is facing counts of conspiracy and attempted murder. Prior to that, a 17-year-old was arrested facing weapons and riots charges, but not for the actual shooting. But this still raises many questions and concerns surrounding the juvenile crime crisis across Maryland. Top prosecutors across the state say the current laws on the books keep them from doing their jobs. But Senator Jill Carter, who crafted these laws, says they're wrong.
I do think maybe law enforcement is misconstruing the law.
Today on Fox 45 Morning News, we spoke with Senator Justin Reedy about the disconnect being seen between some lawmakers and prosecutors. Fox 45's Tom Rogers reports.
The increase in repeat offenders among our youth has increasing calls now for changing state laws and possibly a special session. One of the most vocal lawmakers behind the Juvenile Justice Reform Act, State Senator Jill Carter. She says everyone can do something and the media is perpetuating lies. Another state senator, Justin Reedy, responded to the new laws saying there was a reason former Governor Larry Hogan vetoed the bills.
The state's attorneys in both parties from across the state have said this bill that was passed in 2022 and vetoed by Governor Hogan and then overridden by the General Assembly, it just really was a horrendous step because it basically takes away any real stick for young offenders. None of us want to see a 12-year-old go to jail. But when you have, when criminal organizations know that they can send 11 and 12-year-olds to do organized shoplifting or organized car theft, and that those young people will not be arrested, and that really all that police have and prosecutors have is to sort of talk sternly to them and to their parents, that's a huge problem. And we're seeing it manifest not just in Baltimore or in the region, but all over the country.
Senator Carter said that that's law enforcement. They're turning them away. They can be doing something. They're turning them away. So there's confusion here. Do we need a special session?
Well, I think we need a special session to address a lot of things going on with crime. And I agree. Governor Moore's actually been speaking out more lately saying we should do something about repeat violent offenders, of which I say, hey, all for it. We've been trying for about 2 or 3 years now to address that. We actually need a comprehensive look at what's going on with crime in the Baltimore region and really all over the state. And these are a couple of issues. Repeat violent offenders and how we're handling juvenile crime are two huge areas that are big blind spots right now. A lot of our state's attorneys are doing the best they can, but they do not have the resources. And if law enforcement is that confused, we need to step in and make the law more clear. That's what the lawmakers need to take responsibility to clarify the law and make it much more clear.
Now, Senator Reedy says he wants to see a mandatory diversion program for young people who commit adult crimes and who need the services to provide instruction and get them on the right path for a productive life. Tom Rogers, Fox 45 News.
It's very unacceptable. We got the email saying that the route was canceled.
Finding out that the bus drivers did not practice the route, that is not a good representation of what we're dealing with.
Frustration mounts in Howard County as delayed and canceled buses leave some students stranded. Parents tell Fox 45 News 20 bus routes were suddenly canceled late Monday night, with parents receiving the notice at 11 p.m. The county says their new out-of-state bus company doesn't have enough drivers to cover those routes. In the meantime, the county superintendent says new drivers are being trained to restore these suspended routes, and there will be a thorough audit of the transportation office. He says they have already identified errors that could have been mitigated. Some of those errors were in the data and routes provided to contractors, causing drivers to get lost. Also, contractor technology issues.
It's not only Howard County seeing issues with buses. We are also learning that students in Baltimore County were forced to sit on the floor of an overcrowded bus. Take a look at these pictures. You can see about 8 students sitting in the back of the bus without a seat. Parents we spoke with are up in arms questioning how this was allowed to happen.
You know that that's wrong. So how could you drive off with these, 8 or 9 children sitting on a floor knowing that they are at risk?
They knew at the beginning of the school year how many children were going to be on that bus. They should be prepared for how many children are going to be on that bus and provide the proper bus.
Keep in mind, these busing issues are happening as Maryland puts millions of dollars into public education.
That's right. We are joined now by Project Baltimore's Chris Papps. He's in studio. Chris, shouldn't all this extra funding we keep hearing about help solve some of these transportation issues?
Well, sure. As we know, over the next 8 years, Maryland will be investing $30 billion additional tax dollars into public education as part of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, also known as the Kerwin Plan. But that legislation does not prioritize one basic need: getting kids to school. We could not find any significant investment in transportation included in the Kerwin Plan. But we can see in Baltimore County, the amount of money for transportation has gone up by about $23 million in the last 2 years. The budget for student transportation services increased from about $77 million to $100 million. It's a big increase. Most of that $100 million, just over $60 million, is going towards salaries and wages, another $23 million toward contracted services, which includes some bus companies, outside school bus companies. Now, despite these budget increases, some Baltimore County buses do appear, as you mentioned, to be overcrowded. According to the district, there were 700